Hello, hello, and welcome to this very special edition of the Bilgecast Wrestling Roundup. We're going to be talking about our 5 best and worst moments in our experiences watching professional wrestling over the years. And it's been a fair few years. I started watching proper in 2006. I'm
It,
allowed.
to lessen the lists, I was wondering just if there was the thing of, is it something we have to have been watching? It has to have happened during the time frame we've been watching wrestling, so we can't, for example,
Um,
pull out a specific moment that we've witnessed, like in archives.
no, you can use archive moments. It just has to be significant to you for whatever reason.
Okay.
Yeah. Um, well, what at least one of mine is archive footage that I saw.
Well,
Like,
a few then in that case, then some of my list is safe because a few of my honorable mention definitely.
yeah, right. Well, let's all start off with let's alternate between worst and best and go round the table so that we can discuss things properly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, since
Okay.
host, I think it's best you start.
All right. Well, my honourable mention for worst list, and the reason it didn't make the list is because I thought it was fucking hilarious at the time. um,
Go on.
well, you were there for this, Sam. You watched it with me. It was the Great American Bash 2007 when the cruiserweight title match happened. This would
Oh God.
this would be the last cruiserweight title change for about a decade because the winner was Hornswoggle. Now, I remember
Yeah.
us both laughing our asses off when that happened because we thought
The
it was the funniest shit.
To be
But
fair, the crew. I will admit, no. I'll save this for the conversation afterward after you've explained it.
you
Go on.
see, it killed the cruiserweight division. It actually did. And that's not
I
hyperbole. They retired the title soon after this. And I didn't think that was going to happen. I thought he was going to have it for a bit, and then, like, a heel was going to win it from him, and then things would resume as normal. And the match before that point was actually pretty good for the amount of people that were in it. It
Well, the
was.
thing is, again, the thing is, WWE have this annoying habit, and they've always had it for a while, is that they don't see certain titles as worth a damn. So the
Yeah.
cruiserweight title was already on a whole. It didn't matter who had it anyway, which is I don't want to take anything away from the champion at the time, Gregory Helms.
It was actually Chavo Guerrero.
Well, I don't want to take anything away from Gregory Helms anyway, because he was the longest reigning cruiserweight champion for a while. But
Okay.
the point I want to get to was the I think the reason he held the belt for as long as he did was because WWE just didn't care. I mean, I think at one point Paul London mentioned at one point that after he'd left WWE, that while he was the cruiserweight champion, he was asking when they were going to be able to defend it, and he was constantly told, "If we've got some time on the show, we might throw one on, but we don't care. No one care. We know we're not going to have it tonight." And one day he literally just asked, and the producer flat out told him, "No one cares about you people in your stupid belt."
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the mindset at the time. Was literally that they didn't see the cruiserweights as well as the cruiserweight title wasn't worth a damn to them.
See, I always liked the cruiserweight title and the cruiserweight division.
And you consider that it was the thing that kept the cruiserweight division was the thing that kept WCW afloat for as long as it did, or kept the fans interested.
Yeah, I mean the cruiserweight style is definitely, um, well, something worth watching.
And Hornswoggle is literally just the add Hornswoggle to instantly kill whatever angle he's involved in. He
Yeah,
killed
this is true.
yeah. And just this is just a spoiler because I'm not these are not any of my moments simply because it would get too repetitive. Hornswoggle is responsible for the death of the following. Some parts of NXT season 5, DX, and the 3MB. Also the anonymous general manager the entire anonymous general manager storyline, the Vince McMahon's illegitimate son angle.
And the entire cruiserweight division.
Yeah, he is literally something that kills everything he touches. I'm actually curious, Ian. You've been watching for long enough to know. I'm curious to see your thought. I mean, I can speak for me and Ollie because we were there together watching it. But what were your thoughts on Hornswoggle in general?
Um, well, I remember thinking, looking at him, like, why? Why do we need like a leprechaun character? And I mean, yeah, that was pretty bad to begin with. But then when they made him like his Vince McMahon's illegitimate son, I'm like, again, why?
Well, they did it originally because plans plans fell down because, well, a variety of things happened. They did the angle in response to the Chris Benoit thing after the whole Vince McMahon dying, but then he had to come back to pretty much announce he was dead. So then they did the storyline, and it was going to be Ken Kennedy, but of course Mr. Kennedy was allocating a scandal, so Hornswoggle was thrown in at the last minute. So yeah.
So it would have been Mr. Kennedy, but it wasn't.
Yeah. And you know how little Hornswoggle meant to that in the end anyway, simply because once Vince got tired of the whole angle and they did the whole, oh well, Hornswoggle isn't really your illegitimate son, it's Finley's. Vince got as far from that storyline as he possibly could, and ultimately we didn't even get a good conclusion to it because it ended with JBL just beating up Finley. And the only joyous thing in the match was that JBL threw a trash can at Hornswoggle at ringside and knocked him over. That was the only thing I remember about that entire match.
But yeah, the moment doesn't make the list because I enjoyed it at the time, but it should. I feel like it should be on there because I like the cruiserweights and the cruiserweight division, and I liked them back then. And this was the death knell of the cruiserweight division at the time. And well, I know, says the guy that doesn't actually watch 205 Live, but there's too much wrestling. Yeah.
Huh.
But yeah, I don't think there's ever been another example of a single thing killing an entire division.
I don't think. I mean, in extreme cases, you could say Fabulous Moolah, but let's not.
I can see why you would say that, but
well, Moolah killed an entire division for 30 years.
Well, she held one stagnant for 30 years, is what I've heard. I don't know, I wasn't around for them, but...
Well, again, yeah, it was like 30... I mean, yeah, it was years and years ago, but... yeah, she had a stranglehold to a ridiculous degree. I think Ian should go next with his honourable mention, unless he doesn't have one.
I don't have one.
Oh, okay.
Well, I'll go with mine, and my honourable mention is only on here is, well, this one's a difficult one, but it's also for the same reason that Ollie says he enjoyed it at the time, but benefit of hindsight, it was awful.
Yeah.
Everything involving DX 2006.
Somehow I knew you were going to say that.
You see, I didn't want this one. You see, I had to think of a reason why it couldn't be on my list, and I was arguing between this one and the end of Daphne's career.
Oh yeah, that was
when Rosie Lottelove, who is back in is it actually in WWE at the moment, by the way, and has changed her name and lost a fuck ton of weight after everything she did.
Right.
But yeah, my honorable mention is because DX, I got into wrestling right after DX 2000 had died off.
Right.
Basically, it didn't die off for in a bit with a bang. It literally went with a whimper because it was more Triple H just moved on. Billy Gunn just buggered off. Road Dogg got fired, so the group just split because things were happening and the group just stopped existing. But I'd played enough of the old games and saw DX was a big thing. I'd seen a load of tapes and seen that Shawn Michaels and Triple H were part of DX, and this was before I knew who Shawn Michaels even was. Then, of course, he came back, and then there was that teased DX reunion that never happened because Triple H basically murdered him. But when it happened, I was kind of underwhelmed by everything they were doing because, again, it was more childish than it had to be. Looking back on it, it's more childish than what they were doing before. I mean, the original DX was just them standing up to authority and just trying, Shawn Michaels putting the Canadian flag up his nose to piss off Brett.
Yeah.
Or, crotch chopping and attacking Sergeant Slaughter. Or fucking around with them. Actual stuff. But then this DX was instead, dumping poo on people. Or making butt jokes. It went from going suck it or screw you to poo poo caca wee wee.
Yeah.
Very patronizing, and it lasted longer than it needed to. It dragged on because, again, it was just Shawn and Triple H. There was no Chyna or Rick Rude. There was no Road Dogg and Billy Gunn, who at the time were also doing their own thing to basically respond to DX in TNA at the time, mainly challenging Triple H and Shawn Michaels to actual fights. The only highlight they had was when they did that Raw 1000 thing where they did come out to do their DX thing, and then Triple H then said, weren't there more of us? And they'd repaired all the bridges with the previous members, apart from Chyna at the time, so they brought them back. And they had like old school DX fun because they had the New Age Outlaws there. But the 2006 edition, it was just them fighting the McMahons and nothing else, but it was all cartoonishly stupid.
Yeah.
The only highlight for me, the major highlight, was when they'd actually pushed Vince to a nervous breakdown. Or the bit where Stephanie McMahon legitimately went into labor and Vince did make it memorable by going, my daughter's body has the worst timing of anyone. That bitch!
Oh, yes, that was funny.
It was a point where Shane...
That was the first episode of Raw I watched.
Yeah, but it was just... Because it was legitimate that Stephanie was going into labor, so they had to, change it a bit, change the show a bit, and Vince still made it work.
Yeah. Do you remember the McMahon family prayer?
Yes, I remember the McMahon family prayer, which was before DX formed, but also there's the other highlight, which they don't talk about in a positive light, which was the Survivor Series match where Team DX was, DX, the Hardys, and CM Punk. Where the most memorable thing in it was that they'd brought in Mike Knox from ECW for no other reason than he was in ECW, and he got super kicked by Shawn, pinned, and then Shawn got up and asked who that was. And they literally had an entire segment in the ring where Shawn went over and just asking everyone, who was that? Mike Knox. Who? Mike Knox from ECW. Was he part of the match? Yeah, he's part of the match. Oh. Well, he's eliminated then.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, that was weird.
Yeah. I mean, that was just burying someone. I mean, I thought it was funny at the time, but...
But again, that's most of what DX's entire run was. It was literally laughing at the time, but looking at hindsight, it's just kind of this entire
self-indulgent crap.
It was done better years ago. And then Hornswoggle killed that off too.
Yeah.
Because they insisted on being the mascot. So, yeah, that's my honourable mention for my worst list. So, I guess that moves us on to Ian.
Right.
And
okay. Right, so Ian, what are your thoughts of DX 2006?
I mean, it was good to see them get back together.
Yeah, I agree. It was great to see them get back together, but
But they were like playing to a PG-13 audience. That's the problem.
They weren't originally, but yeah, it did eventually become that.
Well, that's kind of how I felt about it. I mean, because back in the Attitude Era, there was no punches pulled.
Do you remember when they literally pulled their pants off and showed their asses to an audience?
Yeah.
Or Triple H got a woman to literally flash her tits on screen. You know, that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not what I watch wrestling for, but
Yeah, I can understand that, but the point was that DX was basically about being a certain way. Well, yeah, it was a certain thing that made it work.
yeah.
And in the end, all it really was just a neutered version of what it once was.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think you could really do DX anymore.
Well, no, I mean it wasn't it wasn't WWE NWO, which lasted even less time, and was actually worse in some regards. But I'd still say that DX 2006 was worse, mainly because again nobody benefited from it
Yeah.
apart from the marketing department.
Yeah, this is true.
Well,
Right.
if Ian doesn't have a honourable mention, does this mean it goes back to you to start your one?
If Ian hasn't thought of an honourable mention.
Well, I suppose you can call it an honourable mention, since I do kind of find it funny in some way.
Yeah.
Go on.
And I'm gonna cheat here because it's like two things.
Okay, go on.
But they both link with each other.
I'll allow it.
Okay.
Okay, Miller Lane.
Brace yourselves.
Yeah.
I think my anus is break.
It's Mae Young giving birth.
Ah.
Oh God. Oh God. You know, I recently you say that, and then recently Liz saw the whole marriage proposal, the whole pregnancy announcement thing where Mae Young and Mark Henry said it to a crowd full of, a ring full of other wrestlers who were looking all horrified.
Yeah.
Oh God.
Yeah. I mean, it was just. The announcement wasn't that bad because it was just funny, just seeing the looks on people's faces.
Yeah, the shock value was kind of what you'd expect of Attitude Era Raw to begin with.
And it's always fun to hear Jerry Lawler scream in terror.
Oh God, yes.
Especially when it concerns Mae Young.
Oh yeah, the only time he took joy with Mae Young or anyone like Moolah or her being in the ring is when they were being assaulted.
And and then it came to the birth.
Oh.
It was just hijinks ensue.
That was sadly one of the better things that Mark Henry was involved in at the time. If you remember the whole China storyline he was also involved with that ended in a much more disgusting way.
Yeah.
Ugh. Ugh, God, it's either a hand or a guy with a penis.
I mean, the first time she gave birth, it was like a hand, and you think, why?
Yeah, that's the
It
thing.
was actually quite surreal, almost bold.
It wasn't like a disembodied hand like Resident Evil's whole thing. It's like she'd literally given birth to Thing from the Addams Family.
And of course, I remember one person making a joke that Mark Henry is not the real father. The real father is actually the SmackDown fist.
The SmackDown fist.
The worst part is that years later, they did that whole thing again where when Mae Young was still alive, she had a guy in a hand suit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All grown up.
and then she gave birth a second time to Hornswoggle.
Oh God.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was during a New Year's party, and then all of a sudden May starts to like collapses. She's in pain, and it's like, oh, you're having a baby, and she's like, oh, not again. And she gives birth to Hornswoggle, aka the New Year's baby.
At least her name gave birth to the Mae Young Classic. That's at least the one thing she gave birth to that was good.
Yeah.
Okay. I have to agree that I've seen Mark Henry in the Attitude Era is an underrated gem in itself. The sexual chocolate Mark Henry itself. I mean, I remember I think I mentioned the name itself to Ollie, and he just couldn't stop laughing his ass off at the idea because he'd only ever seen Mark Henry as an angry, dreadlocked Mark Henry murdering people.
Yeah, I'd only seen like versions of Hall of Pain Mark Henry and the mid to late 2000s Mark Henry.
So sexual chocolate Mark Henry, I mean, it was. I mean, I don't know if you remember the China storyline where basically he decided he was sexually attracted to China. She had no interest in him, and he'd take her on dates and everything. So eventually, she introduced her to her friend Sammy. Mark Henry made out with her and everything, and then just as they were about to have sex, it turned out it was a guy in drag.
Ah.
Followed by the line of Mark Henry going, "Sweet Jesus, you got a penis!" and then him running to a bathroom and vomiting.
Oh, that would have caused a stir today.
Yeah, you see, during Brian Zane's video on the worst things of the Attitude Era, he mentioned this and said, now, I don't think this is bad because of, Sammy herself. It's the fact that Sammy is the joke. That, guy, these kind of people just exist to try and trick straight men into these things. It wouldn't fly today, and it was definitely a hallmark of Vince Russo, if ever there was one. But yeah, that was Mark didn't really have a good time with these things, and when you can honestly say that the giving birth to a hand is the greatest thing that happens to you. I mean, Mae Young was also the reason that Channel 4 cancelled their relationship with WWE.
Oh God, can you fucking blame them?
It wasn't the hand. It's because she got naked at the Royal Rumble. Because Mae Young was the only person much hornier. I think the whole thing was capped off by the fact that GTV, if you remember that.
Yeah.
I don't know if Ollie will probably not remember the GTV segments. But they were like random TV segments that were put on Raw or Raw. They never revealed who the host of it was or who was doing it, but it would record secret things in black and white and put it on the Titantron. And it'd usually be things like Big Show taking a piss. Or, Val Venus having sex with someone else's wife. But one of them was Mark Henry in bed sweating, talking about how great the sex he just had was. And he just goes on this entire dialogue about it. And then suddenly there's Mae Young in bed with him smoking a cigar going, "Do all you people do is talk?"
Oh.
Yeah, I mean, I think the idea was that GTV was going to be Gold Dust, but he got fired before it aired, any of these segments aired, so I don't know.
Yeah.
Ollie, what do you think of the Mae Young hand thing?
I think you've pretty much summed up my opinion, as well as, it's the kind of surreal shit that in any other context could be like a bold, surrealist art piece, but just comes off as really goofy.
Well, some things only really work in the wrestling bubble, and WWE created such a bubble where this thing would work. So,
I mean, I could probably see someone giving birth to a hand in any other medium as some sort of bold symbolism, but something tells me that's not the intention here.
I don't really know what the intention of the hand was.
It was like, fuck it, why not?
Yeah.
And
Well,
it's probably something that might happen in The Mighty Boosh or like Noel Fielding's Luxury Comedy or something, as I say, surrealist like that. But
well then.
it's just, what was the point of that segment?
All right. Well, I think we should move on to the next bit.
It was funny, but yeah.
So I think we move on to you now, and I don't know
Okay.
if the
Right.
best part, worst part.
Right, now it's honourable mention for best parts. Now, this is an honourable mention because it's not, in hindsight, it's not particularly good, but it is something that I remember from my first episode of Raw, and it set the tone of like a lot of the programming from that point on for me. And I found it funny just because of how sudden it was. It's DX dropping paint on the Spirit Squad.
Okay.
One of whom was would become Dolph Ziggler. And that's funny to think about, which is the only reason this even makes honourable mentions.
I don't really think there's much to it. I don't think there's anything really I can say to expand on it, to be honest.
Yeah, like, I found it funny. It set the tone for DX, which, as we've just discussed, in hindsight was a bit shit. But at the time, I thought it was funny.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, that's my honourable mention for good moments.
Okay, my honourable mention is because it's not, the moment itself was stupid, but because of what it did in the end for a lot of people's careers, ultimately was a good thing, and it was done by someone who, let's face it, their entire career has been, being lazy. And it's the paparazzi production skits from TNA. To explain in context, Kevin Nash teamed up with Paparazzi Productions, which was Alex Shelley and the Austin Star, which you'll know better as Austin Aries, and the X Division, and it was during Kevin Nash's whole hatred of Chris Sabin for some reason, but he was doing goofy segments backstage with Alex Shelley and a bunch of X Division guys where he'd pretend to be Dr. Kevin Nash. Ollie probably remembers Dr. Nash, but the segments themselves were stupid. Like, Kevin Nash would constantly pull an Uncle Ruckus and think, a reverse Uncle Ruckus, and think he was black. And he would mock black wrestlers, telling them they weren't black enough for certain things for some reason. Now, the reason, the biggest one thing that you'll agree with me with, why you'll think this is good, is because this gave birth to Black Machismo. Basically, Kevin Nash decided to mock Simon Cowell's entire X Factor thing, and he's trying to find personalities for the X Division. Ollie will probably remember some of these segments as him doing blot tests with Senshi, who kept saying Warrior over and over again.
Yeah, I remember.
And all kinds of other weird things he'd do with them, including one where he held a courtroom in a toilet with an assless, judge robe. Made very clear that we knew it was assless. But he asked if Jay Lethal tried singing Amazing Grace, to which Kevin Nash said that was bloody awful.
Right.
Then asked if he could rap like us black guys, to which Jay Lethal went, but you're not black. He goes, oh, come on, Jay, I'm blacker than you are. Yeah. Can you do anything else? And then he starts doing Randy Savage impressions, and that gives birth to, the Black Machismo gimmick. But it also helped give rise to a tag team that me and Ollie really loved, the Motor City Machine Guns.
Ah, yes, I remember the Guns.
But it basically got certain characters who, at the time, didn't have a lot going for them in terms of who they were, and gave them something to do, because we knew how good Alex
Seb's here. Hello, Seb. He says the X Factor. That's a contemporary reference.
Yeah, but again, this led to the birth of Low-Ki. It didn't do much for Low-Ki because I'm not going to go into a whole rant about why Low-Ki's career is basically in the toilets and has been for years, and why he's got no career at all now. But it helped push the Motor City Machine Guns. In some form or another. It helped Black Machismo and Sonjay Dutt.
Did something happen to Low-Ki?
What?
Did something
Basically,
happen to Loki?
Loki has burned every bridge with every company he's ever worked with.
Right.
His attitude in general and the way he treats people backstage, you would have thought the fact that because of the way he looks and the fact his voice is as deep as it is and should not fit the body that he lives in.
Yeah. Didn't Thanos end Loki's career? I knew that joke was coming, and yet I still rolled the eyes. Yeah. No, Loki is a wrestler who... Imagine if Krillin sounded like Piccolo.
Yeah, that is actually a very accurate thing. But, yeah. But I will say, for context as well, Paparazzi Productions, other than that, was a tag team of Alex Shelley and... Because Alex Shelley's entire gimmick before the Motor City Machine Guns was he was obsessed with his camera.
Yeah.
And what he would usually do in his tag team matches, and the reason he would lose a lot of them, was because he'd set up the camera outside the ring, and while his partner was setting it up, he'd get rolled up and pinned.
Right.
So that gimmick died off, and then Alex Shelley and Chris Sabin ended up forming they'd already been in Japan as the Murder City Machine Guns.
Yeah, so a short, bald guy with a deep voice. Yeah, I mean, he's a really good wrestler as well, but that's basically what's instantly recognisable about him.
He also wrestled as Senshi. I
Yeah.
think now he's a promotion that will take anybody.
Yeah. And you say he's burned pretty much every bridge that he... with every company.
Honor won't take him. WWE won't take him. New Japan won't take him. He's literally working for MLW at the moment, who has even taken the most hated man in wrestling, Teddy Hart, who I will get to at one point.
Have they taken wrestling superstar Virgil?
No, but he's in AEW from what I've seen.
Really?
I saw him in an AEW shirt at an AEW show, so either he's gatekeeping or crashing or something.
You know what? I wouldn't put it past Virgil to do that.
Scott Hall makes fun of him to his face, and I love it. He said that all Virgil action figures should be laying on their back because that's how most people will recognize him. I know that the TNA references are something that only Ollie's probably going to remember, so I don't know if Ian's familiar with Black Machismo or the Motor City Machine Guns in general.
Hello there, Pete.
I haven't watched any of it. TNA.
Alright, well, basically, Black Machismo...
It used to be good.
Basically, Jay Lethal was a X-Division / Cruiserweight style wrestler who really didn't have much of a gimmick going for him, and his entire gimmick was he was the black version of Randy Savage, to the point where he actually did get permission from Randy to do the gimmick, and it lasted for fucking years.
He got pretty over doing it.
Oh, God. I mean, he doesn't do it anymore, but he was doing Black Machismo to such a degree that if you go into WWE 2K games now, there's actually a thing, I think there was a thing called Black Machismo or Lethal Machismo at one point was one of the entrances, and that was in reference to his entire...
Jay Lethal.
Yeah, the Motor City Machine Guns were literally a cruiserweight tag team that were amazing in the ring. The shit they would do was actually pretty good, considering that before that, all they ever did was wrestle against each other.
I thought TNA was what you say when someone tells you their favourite Dragon Ball Z character.
No, TNA was chosen because Vince Russo wanted to throw use tits and ass as a name for a company, and this was his way of getting around it.
Yeah, because Vince Russo... Hooray!
Yeah, apparently it humiliated everyone who had to sell the promotion to a TV studio.
We're already half an hour in, so we'd probably better move on.
Yeah, okay, so Ian, your honourable mention for
good
moment.
I haven't thought about any good ones.
You haven't thought about any good ones?
No, I thought we were...
That's in a nutshell.
I thought we were only doing the worst ones.
No, it was 5 best and 5 worst. Right, shall we come back to you then? Give you some time to think.
I don't have a lot of time to think.
Okay, right, we'll use what you have.
Okay. Right, so then let it go to a worst moment for you, Ollie.
Right, okay. 5 worst moment. Oh, come on, I had this in my head. Right, my number 5 worst moment and it's pretty minor, so I'm going to put it at the top of the list, was the first time I saw Eva Marie wrestle.
Oh, God, I can believe you.
Like, I called you up soon after I saw that, and, like...
Oh, God, you were angry.
I was like, what the fuck is that?
I think I'd warned you how bad it was, and then
I didn't believe you.
I've never heard you actually that angry, apart from when you'd lost your Wii U cable at one point. That was the only other time I've heard you angry, and then you were literally like ranting at me while I was walking back and forth in my spare room, like, "Okay, Ollie, calm down." You're like, "No,
don't you tell me to calm down."
No, why is this allowed?
No, but it's like it was so bad.
Just remember, she almost rookies, people who were considered
when you say
jobbers.
Vince Russo, I imagine
really
Vince Cable if he
hard.
directed Marvel movies. He's not that interesting, I'm afraid. To be honest, I think of IRS when I think Vince Russo. I don't know why.
Erwin R. Shyster.
Yeah, that's who I picture when Vince Russo's name comes up. I don't know why. Amount of people who calm down when you tell them to calm down, 0. Yeah, that's true. But yeah, basically, it was this match against, I think it was a local talent with a football jersey type deal. And it was so bad. Like, there's a bit where she runs at Eva Marie and she brings up a leg to boot her and onto her back. The leg strike clearly misses, like you see it go past her. But they try and cut away from a camera quickly, like to disguise it, and the other wrestler falls over, and like to crowd chants of "What was that?" It's like, I mean, it was just so bad. Like, it's only this high on the list because it was short and mercifully over quickly. Either Marie, yeah. Does it not matter which one? Eva, EVA, Eva Marie.
Okay. Well,
yeah.
Okay.
So, do either of you have anything to say on that match?
I have nothing to say on Eva Marie other than her being removed from the thing is, people use the excuse that she improved by the time she came to TV, but the thing is,
she was still shit. She did improve, but she was still shit.
Here's the thing, Ollie. If you are if you're part of a group that's or one of those running groups, and you can't run, like you literally crawl, or you flail on the floor.
Yes, you don't have to remind me of the like DMU Track Society incident.
Yes, but then if you improve, yes, you could say that crawling is an improvement, but it's still not running. And Eva, even if she did improve, she'd improve to such a small degree that she still shouldn't have been on television.
Yeah.
And the excuse that she left on the stupidest of terms. Well, it took a lot to beat Kelly's awfulness. Is all I'm going to say.
Kelly at least didn't blatantly miss her moves and have them sold for anyway.
No, she just ran towards the ropes as if they were threatening with a knife.
Why isn't it running? Why isn't it running? Says Pete.
Okay, for my number 5 worst moment, I'm just gonna have to say when ECW went to Sci-Fi when it was first announced on Sci-Fi. And I'm going to cheat a little and just use the segments because this was a recurring segment for like 3 weeks.
Yeah.
The sci-fi-ish shit that would usually end with the Sandman. Basically, and nothing synonymizes how bad it was than the ECW zombie.
Oh God, I remember the ECW zombie.
Basically, a guy comes out in what looks like a ripped lumberjack uniform outfit as a zombie, gets in the ring and hits that riveting promo. Then the Sandman, a alcoholic, chain-smoking man in a shirt, comes through the audience wielding a Singapore cane, smacks the zombie half to death, and then pins it.
Yeah.
I assume because apparently it was a match. This continued with things like an alien the Nacho Man, which was literally a Nacho Libre character with a Macho Man Randy Savage voice.
Right.
This would go on for a while, and he wouldn't really actually fight another actual wrestler until Kevin Thorne. So I have to say it's so low on the list because ultimately, unlike some other things, it didn't damage anyone, but it did paint the bleak picture of how that this wasn't going to be the ECW that we were expecting it to be, especially after One Night Stand.
Yeah.
Ian.
Yeah.
Is Singapore Kane related to Citizen Kane? No, but he might be related to Corporate Kane or Imposter Kane.
Unless anyone else has any other thoughts as to the ECW zombie,
Well,
I think we should Ian's worst moment.
Not specifically the ECW zombie, but the ECW show in general. I didn't mind it.
Towards the end, though, but you got to think in the beginning, all it was the Big Show was ECW champion, which nobody liked because he looked like he was dying after every single match because of how out of shape he was. The ECW original was not getting to do anything or leaving shortly afterwards and being involved in stupid segments.
Yeah.
Later ECW became what basically NXT would eventually, become.
Yep.
But by a very small margin. So, Ian, your fifth worst moment.
My fifth worst moment, I'm just going to get to the meat of it because it's just like, what the fuck, you know?
All right.
And that is Harvey Whippleman winning the women's championship.
I think this was before my time, so you're gonna have to elaborate.
Well, what happened is a really bizarre match where who was he fighting?
Well, should we explain who Harvey Whippleman even was to Ollie for context's sake?
I think that would be best, yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Harvey Whippleman was a former manager in the WWE who was supposed to be based on Pee Wee Herman.
He spent most of his time, by the way, getting people to fight the Undertaker, such as the Ugandan giant Kamala and even the giant Gonzalez. So you can imagine. And the only time I've ever seen him do anything else is when he appeared at WrestleMania 10 to insult Howard Finkel and call him all kinds of things until Adam Bomb came out, and then Adam Bomb got sat on by Earthquake, and that was it.
Seb says, here's a wrestling gimmick, a psychoanalyst wrestler, segment feud. Very good.
But now we've explained who Harvey Whippleman is. Go on, Ian.
All right, I just remembered, he was in this really bizarre match against the Cat.
The Cat was, of course, the wife of Jerry Lawler at the time, who looked like a 13-year-old.
Yeah, and basically they were just fighting in this sand pit full of fake snow, and he was dressed up as a woman called Havina.
Yeah, wasn't he wearing some kind of tracksuit?
So
and a wig?
Was it basically a proto Santina Marella?
No, because Santina actually looked and dressed like a woman in some capacity. This one you couldn't tell because she wore really thick sunglasses, a really thick tracksuit, stuffed and everything, to look like it had body weight. Because Harvey Whippleman was skinny as all fuck, like Colin Delaney skin. I know Ollie's used to managers that are that fat, Father James Mitchell or Paul Bearer or Jimmy Hart. But this was like if Jimmy Hart got anorexia. And yeah, but because that was the whole point, he was tiny as fuck, which is why he was always managing massive guys. And he's and I think I've seen it. He was completely stuffed full of he'd stuffed the suit, the tracksuit and stuff and everything to hide his identity. Put on a fake voice and everything, and put on a wig, so we couldn't tell. It was just some random ugly woman.
And yeah, that's what it is. He's in this pool filled with fake snow, and he's like wrestling at the cat with a bunch of divas on the outside, like stopping them from leaving.
Yeah.
He manages to pin her, and then I think he accidentally lets slip who he really was, and then he just gives up, takes off the wig, and he's like, "Yeah, I'm the first man to win the women's title."
I think he'd won the title, and then when they interviewed him, he just took off the wig and everything and revealed it was just Harvey Whippleman.
Yeah, and then all the divas got very mad and then piled on top of him. And then he lost the title the following day to Jacqueline.
Props to Jacqueline.
Yeah. And that's pretty much all there is to say about it.
Well then, I think we've now got to go right back to Ollie's. Well, Ollie, we've now got to go on to you and your fifth best moment.
Right, my fifth best moment. Well, these are in no particular order, but I think my fifth best moment, and it's this high on the list purely because it didn't end up being that significant in the grand scheme of things, but it was the first match I really got into as just a pure wrestling match. It was Kurt Angle versus Shawn Michaels at WrestleMania 21.
Okay, that's fair enough.
It's just a really good match. There's like the in-ring storytelling is very good, and well, it's Kurt Angle and Shawn Michaels. They always bring it.
It was a dream match for both of them because Kurt at the time was going through his whole, best wrestler thing.
Yeah.
And Shawn Michaels was Mr. WrestleMania.
Yeah.
So...
And I remember I showed that match to my former stepdad, and to explain who they were, I said, that Shawn Michaels is basically the best. Like, he's regarded as one of the best wrestlers ever. So is Kurt Angle, but he actually won an Olympic gold medal in 1996 and hasn't shut up about it since.
Okay.
But yeah, it's just a really good match, and like it has you on tenterhooks right up until the finish, and then the crowd even applauds Shawn Michaels, who lost that match. Spoiler alert! Spoiler alert for a wrestling event in 2005.
Yeah. Well, I think it was 2006 actually.
No, 22 was 2006.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, and that was match of the night for me for that event, and it was definitely the work rate match.
Yeah.
Like it's like something you would have seen on the indies if the indies were then what they are now.
Okay.
So
best moment. So fifth best moment for me. I'm just gonna throw. I know I'm cheapening this one, so don't give me any shit for it.
I won't. I would never.
But basically, the whole broken Matt Hardy in TNA thing.
Okay.
Why would that be cheapening it? Broken Matt Hardy in TNA was amazing.
It's because it can't really be considered a moment, mainly because again, space and time means nothing to broken Matt Hardy in general. But it's because of if you followed the story from the beginning, Matt went through a table, and this happened. Then suddenly he does this one segment, and it's considered the worst goddamn thing in TNA history, to the point where other wrestlers are mocking him for it and saying they don't know whether it's the most genius thing ever or it's the stupidest thing they've ever seen, and they're dumber for watching it. And then it turns into a whole thing where he can't pronounce words in a certain way, or he refers to people by certain names, like Brother Nero or the Masked Businessman.
The Masked Businessman.
This becomes
and
a thing where
he's on Chris Jericho's podcast, and he starts it by saying, "Brother Keith, I knew you'd come."
Yeah, but that's the thing. He's acting weird because you got to remember, Matt Hardy, but at that point had been in a whole. After the Lita situation, which is not a segment I'm going to bring up, spoilers. He basically, his reputation went down the toilet after that entire thing. WWE didn't help matters, but then he started to seem like he was actually mentally unstable with his talks of murdering Drew McIntyre and things as well, for reasons I don't quite understand.
Yeah.
And then, of course, when he came to TNA, he was so hated that that when he won the world title, he gave it up the next night because people were booing the fuck out of him. Then suddenly he starts doing this broken character, and in storyline, it's gotten to the point where his wife can't even be around him and takes the baby and leaves him while he's playing the piano and dyeing his hair to look like, Sweeney Todd.
Yeah.
Then of course, that whole segment where Jeff turns up, and then it shows that Rebby was actually part of it, and it becomes completely insane to the point where they have the final deletion match, which
the final deletion.
WWE thought was so fucking stupid that they parodied it with the Wyatt compound match.
Yeah, but in doing so, they show that they don't know why it worked.
But there's a reason why why it's not. You'll wonder why it's not so high up on the list, but it's mainly because it's a collection of moments, so it loses points on that. But it was the fact that they would, challenge. Eventually, Jeff would join it as Brother Nero. Even Cassius Ohno joined it at one point on the Indies, but then there was all the little segments he'd do. He'd carry it over into his real life. He technically supported TNA when it had no money, when it was going through its TNA going through shit state. He actually funded and actually put a load of the TNA shows on his home compound and invited people like the Days of the New, the Bucks of Youth, the Express that Rocks and Rolls.
Yeah.
But then there were other weird things like the Lake of Reincarnation where he threw people in. And I just want to say that one of my favourite parts of it was when he threw Abyss into it and he came out as Joseph Parks. Or when Jeff Hardy
It's a dilapidated boat!
Or when Jeff Hardy got his legs broken.
Yeah.
And then he took him into he threw him in and he came out as Jeff Hardy, the Jeff Hardy from Immortal. The one that smokes cigarettes and has that shit belt.
Yeah.
And then Matt just grabs him by the hair and goes, "This is not the incarnation I need!" And then just drowns him and brings him back out. His brother Nero.
Yeah.
Or when Matt was being pinned and the dilapidated boat broke up the pin.
Yeah.
Because very few tag teams could work that, and I think the fact Decay, which I have to give credit to Abyss, Crazy Steve, and Rosemary, because Vanguard 1 and Rosemary's fights were hilarious.
Yeah.
Rosemary is great to begin with, but the fact is that Rosemary's entire thing was she'd spit mist.
Yeah.
And it spit mist back at her and went, "Booyah, bitch," in code.
Yeah.
Of course, this entirely ended with this ended in two particular timelines, by the way. The Hardys in TNA ended in two particular ways. Matt and Jeff decided TNA was not worth their time anymore, and they had to go and wrestle somewhere else, wrestle other wrestlers throughout time and space. But unfortunately, they couldn't take the TNA tag team titles with them, so they disintegrated, and then the belts just appeared in Abyss and Crazy Steve's hands. Or in their timeline, they took the belt, because they were leaving TNA, they took the TNA tag team belts to the Lake of Reincarnation and threw them in.
Yeah.
And then they came back as different belts. There was an actual lawsuit, there was an actual legal thing over the tag team titles, of which at one point, Rebby, I believe, threatened the company that she'd melt them down into new fucking jewelry.
Yeah.
But I give these things because it elevated Matt Hardy to relevance he hadn't had since before the brand split, or even the Mattitude era.
Yeah.
If you're enough to remember that. That was the last time that was ever relevant, and that was 2003. And since then,
I never thought that Matt would be the more over Hardy, but he is.
It's on this, but he also supported an entire company literally by himself, and that's not metaphor like what they use nowadays to say, "Oh, this person's carried the company." He literally, when TNA had no money, financed the entire show so that some of the people could even work.
Yeah, wow.
When he had his weird premonition, and he
I mean, you can say that the champion is carrying the company on their back. It takes another thing to actually do that.
I should point out that he did take liberties, and he even changed the ramp thing so that instead of the Titantron, it was a giant wooden broken Matt Hardy head with its mouth open, and the wrestler's entranceway was his mouth.
Oh my god.
It was really fucking bizarre. Ian, what about your best moment?
Well, been thinking it over, and this one is more recent.
Okay.
Okay.
It works.
And the one I thought of is Bailey turning heel.
Okay,
Oh.
I will accept. Actually, Liz actually said that she likes Bailey's look now that she's heel.
Yeah.
That suits her face better.
I agree.
From an aesthetic point of view, which is where, in my opinion, comes from the
Yeah.
creative.
Yeah, I accept that.
Mm.
Want to go into a bit more detail?
Well, as you know, Bailey is when she first started, she's this fun-loving character, and
Well, actually, when she first started that whole thing, she seemed to be mentally disabled or something. I think they were going for a Eugene-ish thing with her when she first turned up, and it was weird to watch.
Yeah.
But I get where you're coming from.
yeah, she was like this fun character that kids loved. You know, and she did some fun little skits with Finn Balor.
Yeah.
And you know, and
Just getting it before it smushes into
yeah, you know, and she was fun to watch, and she was an entertaining wrestler.
Yeah.
But there had to come, but of course there had to come a time where there had to be a change. You know.
Well, yeah, it's inevitable that someone is going to turn heel eventually. Hulk Hogan proved that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Although I wish that happened to Cena.
Well, Cena was a heel to begin with, so I don't think it counts. I mean that someone's going to become heel in their career at some point.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but then when Bailey did turn heel, she came out with this new look.
Yeah.
And murdered the buddies.
Yeah, she murdered the Bailey buddies
With an axe.
With an ice pick.
No, it was a pickaxe.
Was it?
Yeah. No, an ice pick
Murdered
is.
an instrument.
Yeah, well, it was a sharp instrument anyway.
Yeah.
And it made a child cry.
Yeah, they're making a child cry.
She made many children cry.
No, but they actually reported that there was actually a child crying when she killed the Bailey buddies.
Yeah.
There's even a guy in the audience at one point dressed as a Bailey buddy going, "Please don't kill me."
And I just thought that was like one of the most dramatic face to heel changes ever, you know, since Hulk Hogan.
I mean, she had been teasing the heel turn for a while. She'd aligned with Sasha Banks.
With Nikki Cross, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, she was a heel in denial up until that moment.
And you know, I'm wondering when she's going to turn on Sasha Banks.
I don't know if she will. I think that the fact they haven't gone with the whole faction thing with her, because, you know, she is the de facto heel at this point, no matter what.
Yeah.
But Sasha seems to be more her minion than the other way around at this point.
Yeah.
Which is good for Bailey, because Bailey has always been... I know you haven't followed her in NXT, but Bailey's entire thing in NXT was the Four Horsewomen were acknowledged as a thing that existed, but she was always the runt of the four.
Yeah.
Because
she was a heel in denial. I didn't know she was Egyptian. But
yeah, she was basically the runt of the entire group, would lose everything that they were involved in. And that was kind of like the whole crux of why she won the NXT Women's Championship, was the Sasha's entire thing against her was that Bailey was a failure because she couldn't live up to any of the other three, and then she finally did it.
Yeah.
Don't you dare put that biscuit there? Sorry, Liz is cleaning up under the table, and Nicole's trying to put things on Liz's back.
Right.
Oh, children.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much it, really.
Okay.
It's not historical moments, but it will be soon, I guess.
Yeah. Well, that's an interesting one. Okay, dudes, we're hitting the hour mark, so I'm thinking, I didn't realise how much depth we'd go into here. So I'm thinking we make this a series, because it's not like anything's going to happen in WWE next week. So why don't we
Okay.
pick this up again next week?
Well, actually, Survivor Series is happening this soon, isn't it?
Is that this Sunday?
I don't know if it's this Sunday.
Well, then we're
It might-
probably not going to lose out on much programming, are we?
Oh, well, the Survivor Series thing is going to be that whole NXT versus Raw and SmackDown thing.
Yeah. But, like, we're an hour in and we've only got, like, honourable mentions 5 and 4. No, honourable mentions and 5s down there, so I think we're going to need more than one podcast for this.
Okay,
Yeah.
that sounds fair.
Yeah. So,
Right, so next week we'll try and at least get 4 and 5, 4 and 3 in.
yeah. I mean, if Survivor Series or anything interesting happens, we'll do a special.
Okay,
Yeah.
but yeah, I think this was a good one, especially considering I forgot all about Harvey Whippleman winning the women's championship, and I had to look through some old footage to remember why I loved the whole black machismo and that whole thing and where it originated from.
Yeah.
Because it's hard to really say what made them, which Motor City Machine Guns moment was the best. Because I honestly was tempted to use the best of 5 series between Beer Money versus the Motor City Machine Guns from TNA.
Yeah.
But I thought that the thing that gave us it probably held more precedence.
Yeah.
And believe me, I avoided a lot of bad things that are not on my list.
Yeah. Right. So, okay, I think we'll leave it there for now. We'll come back next week with I guess I'll change the name of the stream for part 1.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see.
Yeah, but this one didn't feel as much work.
Yeah, I know. It's almost as if wrestling was actually fun at one point.
Also, Ian got to speak a hell of a lot more this time.
Yeah.
Which I personally blame myself for the earlier ones.
Like, Ian, talk over us a bit more, because, we want to hear what you think.
Your opinion matters to us, and I'm not just saying that because I'm a telemarketer.
You're my number 1 customer. The Big Show was in that movie. I'm gonna deck your halls, Bob.
Yeah, knowing that Big Show punched Arnold Schwarzenegger is hilarious. I still can't believe you brought the Mae Young giving birth to a hand. There's so many Addams Family jokes I can make out of that now.
Yeah. Alright, so we'll leave it there for now. You know where you can find us. We're all listed at the bottom of the image. Thanks for joining us. This was a fun podcast. We'll pick it up again next week. Looking forward to it.
God, Ollie's actually looking forward to it. That means it's good.
Yeah. Now I'm probably going to have to ruin my enthusiasm for wrestling by watching SmackDown, because I still haven't.
Well, with the good must come the bad.
Alright. Well, thanks for listening, guys. And we will see you next week.
Alright, see you later.
See you next week, guys.
Bye.